external transformation. So Jay talked about a lot of different things that he sees as challenges going forward and ways we have to change our industry. And we're going to focus a little bit on this panel with respect to things that our panelists, companies are doing with respect to innovation and communicating with their different stakeholders. So whether it's a physician, a patient, any type of other constituents, how they're doing things differently than 20 years ago when Merck had 10,000 sales reps and you could walk around with a bag and a detailed piece and a sample and try and talk about the value of the product. So I'm Bob Glasser. As you heard earlier, I spent many years with Merck. Jay and I worked together in marketing back several years ago. I've been involved with Indegene for a little over 12 years now, and have actually been fortunate enough to be on 5 of these panels over the last 6 years or so. This is the first one in the U.S. And I'll turn it over to Rob, my colleague, to introduce himself.
Rob Garcias, also with Indegene. Been with the organization for about 11 years. My major focus is working with our customers in managing and improving overall stakeholder engagement across the organization and helping them develop multi-channel strategies and a framework that is applicable to all the different verticals within the business franchise, both locally and then also being able to repeat that on a global basis.
Great. Maybe we can just come down the row. Robert, does that anybody introduce themselves, please?
Sure. Hi. My name is Robert Garcia. I'm the Director of Integrated Marketing for Specialty Brands and Products.
I am Dave Lennon.
Hey, you have a green light there.
Hi, I'm Dave Lennon. I'm the Vice President and Head of the Lung Melanoma and Neuroendocrine franchise for Novartis Oncology. This is my second time with Indegene, and I think you guys, wherever I move next, you'll have to have it there. My last one was in China.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dana Roth, and I am the head of multi-channel strategy and operations at Access Control. So this is my first time on an Indegene panel, but I'm happy to be on it.
Well, I'm not from China, but my name is Theo Niemenhuis. I work for Boehringer Ingelheim. In Ingelheim, it's Germany, although I'm Dutch, but used to work many years here, so it's very complex, but my first time here, and when I told my youngest daughter I was going to the US for a conference, she said to me, "So Dad, what's a conference?" And I said, "Well, it's a place where people who know about things talk to other people who know about things." And she said, "Okay, but shouldn't Mom go?" So I guess you have to do it with me, but
That's pretty good. So the way we're going to format this is, I've written down a few questions, as has Rob. We're going to kind of tag team this. And I want to start by kind of reflecting on a couple of things that Jay said that I wrote down. First being, his however was we need to do things differently in the future. And typically, pharma's been pretty slow to change. I think we all admit that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how these companies are preparing for that and doing things differently. And then I thought the other insightful comment is we really need to raise the bar. Not only does the selection cycle and everything allow us to get out ahead of it and proactively do it, but in everything we do, whether it's IT transformation, research and development transformation, we really need to raise that bar and let others follow, the discovery-based pharmaceutical companies, because it only takes 1 or 2 bad eggs, we've seen that in the last year, that turns public sentiment against us. So I'd like to kind of start off asking the panel, reflecting on one of the drivers, one of the tailwinds that they talked about, the aging of the population. And not just the aging of the population, but the increasing amount of chronic disease due to our lifestyles. Obviously, the research and development groups are attacking that challenge very rigorously. But from a commercial standpoint, how are you either, addressing this massive change? Because I think one of the points Jane made was, therapies have a huge behavioral component to it. And unless we as commercial people can help either through our providers, or directly to patients, help change the behavioral component of medicine, we won't get these predicted outcomes. So kind of with that as background, and I'll open up to anybody here, what kind of things have you done in the commercial organization to come closer to these key stakeholders that are really, being able to drive behavioral change? Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. I think one thing we should all realize, and we may think that we didn't do it that much, I think, as an industry, is that at the end, we have to serve customers. And the way this whole industry works, at the end, also very much determined by how customers look at us and how we interact with customers. We are very good at thinking from a brand perspective, from our company perspective, looking at our customers. But I think we should realize that we have to turn it around now. Because if you are a customer, if you look at us how we operate, sometimes you think, well, it doesn't make any sense. And actually, it doesn't make any sense now. So we have to start doing things differently because they have changed, we have changed the way we operate, and where you're probably one of those industries that have been working in a similar way for such a long time that other industries have transformed themselves quite a bit. Of course, we have to deal with a lot of regulations and other things, but at the end, we need to ask ourselves always, does it make sense what we do? When you look through the eyes of a customer at a company like us, like in this case, Boehringer, or we talk about Merck, AstraZeneca, whatever. I think that is the first question we need to ask ourselves. And it means that sometimes they require they have different needs and different preferences, and this is something we need to understand and we need to accept and need to deal with that. I think that is the challenge we all have, is that we need to start working differently because we know that our products will offer value, and definitely for those patients that those needed, but there's a lot of other people around it, as we know, that we have to deal with. And we have to deal with it in a way that at the end it works for all of us. And that might not be so much of sending people out with visual aids and telling how wonderful our products are. But that is probably known pretty quickly, but then it's about how can we make it work, how we can create the biggest value for our patients, how can we do that the best way, and what is our role there, and what is the role of the other players in the marketplace, and how can we figure that out, and how can we make that. And the most difficult part is it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, so we have to become way more agile, and maybe less with one approach is the right one, but we have to make sure that we have maybe 10 different approaches, or 15, or whatever makes sense at the end, that get to the goal of delivering the value to our patients at the end, but also to society. That is a little bit what we are doing right now, and that's not always easy for any company, I think, if we talk about it, whatever company we talk about, but also not for companies around for 35 years. So it is tough, but this is something that we have to become. One of the things that Jay showed about customer centricity, I think that's where it starts. It starts with keeping the customer in mind, and then realizing that we are very good in developing products. Maybe not so good anymore in bringing them to the right patient group in the most effective way. This is something we need to understand and resolve by looking at ourselves through the eyes of the customer.
Dana, any thoughts from the GSK standpoint on the changing commercial model and the impact it has on different stakeholders and how you guys are addressing it?
Yeah, I think from a GSK perspective, obviously we're looking at our customer base in terms of payers, consumers, as well as physicians. And when we look across that, I feel like their needs are changing, they're experiencing technology in a way that we have not really yet been able to keep up with. Because I think some of, even what we're trying to do in terms of our commercial reorganization and transformation, is to enable ourselves to be agile enough, which is some of what you touched on, be agile enough to deliver against their changing needs. Because, interesting listening, to the keynote address. I mean, we look at some of the big sort of transformational strategies that we want to look at in terms of NDA filing and the app with your drug. But then on the ground, we have these realities of doctors can't even prescribe our products because they're not in the EHR system. So there's things happening on so many levels, and triangulating that and understanding where to focus to bring that value has been a big part of what we're focused on in GSK.
David makes an interesting point, and we're talking about an aging population. But the days of grandma and grandpa with the VCR and the blinking light are kind of over. I mean, these folks are aging, but they're becoming more and more technology savvy. So they're certainly on par with young folks in their internet use. They're using apps. They're very social, right, to connect with family and friends. And so as the population gets older, people who become native digital folks and people who have adopted digital start to enter into that system. So there's a lot of opportunities within digital communications that will allow us to communicate to them, perhaps eventually on a one-to-one, and we're going to eventually get one-to-one drugs, right? Designer pharmaceuticals will be able to communicate with that in a way that these people can accept and use. And I think that's an important thing, right? Because we're talking about the aging population, we're not talking about people who are technology savvy.
So David, how important are these different channels in oncology marketing?
So I think the issue of channel duplicity and multiplication is really the key theme overall. Right? We all talk about multi-channel marketing these days. I think we're still fundamentally struggling, though, with the transition from what is still a very effective channel of one-to-one promotion in front of a doctor or in front of a stakeholder customer. And really, how do we generate scale and sustainability in these other channels? And I always comment that a marketing team can very effectively spend $100,000, $1 million in the digital channel. But when you get beyond that to $10 million, $20 million in the scale of our business, that's where these investments start to really move the needle, so to speak. That's harder in the U.S. market, and that's harder for our marketing folks or strategic folks to get their head around in really quick effort. So I still think we're in a very dynamic period of transition, and how do we really make that actionable such that it will generate a return on business?
So from my perspective, it's one of the things I took away from the keynote as well. One of my core questions today is around the data, the popular term big data in the marketplace. I think it came up twice in the keynote with two sort of areas. One is IT. We need that IT cloud infrastructure to be able to start to work with this data a lot quicker. But in our industry, we've always had data at the hub, right? The center of everything we do from clinical stage to commercialization of the product today. But as an industry, we're light years behind a lot of other sectors, a lot of industries. Now, some of that is due to the nature, some of the uniqueness of our industry, for sure. But I think the better that we can get at harnessing this data, bringing this data in from an ever-changing data set, bringing this data together, the better predict outcomes, to better understand our efforts and the value of our efforts to use data is a huge impact for that moving forward. So my question for now is really about what are you guys doing as a business to address this? What are some of the major challenges you're facing as you do that?
One of the things that I'm working on, I spend a lot of time educating our med legal folks. When we start talking about big data, or even data in general, to use it, we have to get permission to use it. And I'm sure a lot of folks out here have opportunities to market using data, dynamic content, using what you know about people within databases and getting that information out there. regulatory folks get a little uncomfortable with dynamic content because every promotional piece looks a little different, acts a little different. So I think one of the responsibilities we have is to work with our internal teams, break down the walls, right? It's no us and them. It's not marketing and med legal, right? We're just one team moving towards a common goal. And having them understand, okay, we have all this data. Let me show you where it lives and how we can use it. Get these folks on board. Because until you get them on board and recognize it and allay some of their fears, because a lot of their risks absolutely are valid, some of it is just the risk of the unknown. So as you start to look at this data, you bring these folks along with the process, and I have found that they're willing to say, yes, that makes sense. I get it. You can use this data for this reason or that reason. And it was only because they understood the larger use of it. So I don't think we can talk about technology and data without understanding each organization's people and their processes in order to get this stuff out.
I agree. I think somebody else has to push the envelope and actually have this type of change. Use this data, use it in a certain way. But this is one of the easiest ways of doing that would have them closer to it and a better understanding. Talk about the perception of our industry and understanding where the pharmacy products come from. They don't understand the back end and how we price things. So when people are educated and more bought into the process, it's easier to sort of move along and understand exactly. It's not detrimental or a risk for the business.
The amazing thing is that we're actually an information company in the industry. By our information, the stuff we sell is better than decades. And it's only the information we build around that actually generates any value. The issue that people don't realize is that there are companies that are specifically targeting changing that information architecture to change the value something else. And so real-world data is kind of the area where this is most likely to happen. But what they're trying to do is define a pharmaceutical value in data that they control. Right? So if you're, and I was at IBM Health last week, and they're trying to define ways to describe the value of our product with information that they have. We don't. And that is fundamentally stealing our value. And then there's folks who want to provide that, as a framework for how you should pay for service, pay for innovation, and disintermediate us in the process. And I think fundamentally, the issue of urgency in our groups like that don't fundamentally understand that we can get, if we don't do it, someone else is going to do it for us, and they're going to then steal the value of it. And provide, they'll be the gatekeeper for our value. So,
I think the data as well, I think everybody keeps talking about big data, but it's really about good data, right? And how do you turn that data into a really actionable insight that's informing really important business questions? Because I feel like at this point we have so much data, it's like we could know anything about anyone, but what do we need to know to actually address the business challenges that we have? So I think there's that simplistic, what business question are we trying to answer? Because we're constantly looking at that and using it.
Which ties back to the comment on analytics and actually looking at the data and actually able to drive decisions that are actually actionable.
I think when we talk about real world data, etc., we think a lot about medical data and patients, etc. But I think from a commercial perspective, we should not underestimate actually the data we need to have just to understand our customers better and to make sure that whatever we offer them and talk to them makes sense and it's relevant. So that's another area where we start to realize that we need new skills. So we're bringing in these data scientists, the people who are trained to predict very clearly how many white shirts should the company buy, should clothing company at what point, etc. Now these companies, whether they come from Yahoo or from Amazon or whatever, now they come into a different world that actually we believe is very different, but actually from them it's not so different because we talk about passionate with preferences, etc. And then it starts with what you said, that you need to start to think about what do you need, what kind of data is really relevant before you start gathering the data, and then you start to find out it's very scary experience, and you think, okay, all the data we have, the way we set it up, we can't use it. It's totally useless. And we have to start creating good data, and data that you can analyze. If you let these people who are very smart, very, the guy from MIT now, my group, and looks at this and looks at data sets, and I can't do anything with it. And these are things that we have to go back to the basics and start doing them. And that is something that is actually quite frustrating for a lot of people in the company. They say, well, we want to move forward, now we first have to fix something. But if we don't do it, we can't move forward. We have to realize that as well. So I think the customer side of data is as important as the medical side of data. And it's a little bit easier in a way that we can own some of it even better. And on the medical side, we have to work a lot together with the providers that have the data that we don't have, and try to make sure that we get really the information out of it that helps us in our decisions, also in better making better decisions for our patients, understand the disease better, understand the treatment better, and also are able to better see what is the real therapeutic needs still out there. I think that's also what we will discover more and more using the data. But it's all about, at the end, that we understand what do we want to get out of it, what do we want to learn, and what do we need to do to be able to learn, to be able to answer those questions using the data.
Yeah, going back, because it made me think of one of the 7 areas of change that you mentioned in IT. It's always been mechanical plumbing. And it needs to be more of an analytical and business strategy function. And, what changes do you see in your company to kind of have that being driven from a commercial standpoint so that you have commercial utility of the data and the analytics, stuff that's like R&D or post-marketing surveillance?
I think we need totally different people in that team. And with different skill sets. The people are technology savvy, but they understand business, and they are able to think with you and become true business partners. In our case, of course, we have a lot of people, global IT in Germany, and that is a little different. How you change those things and being in the US and say, well, let's stop some of these people there, and then we start something else, because you need new capability. I think we've been recruiting people in these areas where we've never recruited ever before. And so that to become really, they get a new role. It's not about keeping your laptops running, it would be nice, but way more important is becoming a real business partner in technology. What we do a lot about, in my division, a lot about new customer models, etc. And they are a strategic, such an important part of the team that we work with. Because you need people to understand it, because technology drives so many changes right now. But you also need to understand it's not just about technology, but you need to understand what it means for business. So I think that is a challenge that we have right now.
I think it's also an iterative process, right? Like you're saying, we gather this data, but we don't know what to do with it, or we can't use it. We need to take, I think, the industry to take a step back, say what questions do we want to answer in the new world in terms of how it will impact the stakeholders that we have to deal with today, that we potentially didn't have to deal with in the past, and ask the questions. And then the data may not answer those questions. Well, the answers we get back from the data may spawn on more questions. So it is an iterative process, and I think the people, as the IT play such an important role in that, they need to be, as we mentioned earlier, brought into that process and have a business unit as well, and how it's applicability to market.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. We talked about lowering the wall. Sometimes we get the challenges that we might face with IT folks because they weren't at the table right when we started thinking about, well, what's the business strategy? What do we want to measure? How do we determine if this was successful? Often we're like, collect all this data, and at the end, we have to nail this. You gotta bring people around, big round table, big believer around tables, right? People who are at the end of that process should be brought forward, and people who started should continue all the way on until you've reached what you're trying to find in terms of successful measures. I think what happens at that point is that you start to craft what you want to measure, campaign performance, You get really good ideas from folks that used to be behind a wall or a curtain and you throw stuff over. So, getting that dialogue going often and early really becomes important. Now, in terms of tools, as IT starts to understand what the business needs are, they understand that part of the process, and not just service organizations and process. They start to come to you with tools that they're familiar with, like data visualization. There's going to be a lot of data out there, and some of us are comfortable with spreadsheets, and some of us not so. Data visualization is going to help marketers understand the value of what that data brings to the business, the success of their campaigns, and I think that's an opportunity for IT to sort of start to cover that gray area and move, as you said, to business partners and less the economy.
Well, and the opportunity that groups to be externally focused, such that they also bring in alliances and support, so that I'm not convinced we need to build everything. And there's plenty of folks innovating out there that are cycling through stuff much faster than we do internally. And that externalization of a lot of those tools needs to happen, but who's managing that process, who has the time to be on across a very large organization is really critical.
I think at GSK, IT and commercial, certainly in the transformation that I've been leading, are partners at the table. So we have an incredibly close working relationship with our IT partners in terms of the strategic transformation. It's not perfect. But,
it'll change before we get it perfect in order.
So I'm going to change the topic, and Jay had a slide on pricing, and I read in the paper the other day, Express Scripts did a survey or whatever pricing from last year, and the average increase in prices over the industry was about 16.3%. I was used to back in the 80s, those types of price increases, and we went through a period of virtually no price increase for many years. Back to, it seems like an area where prices, are increasing at a rapid rate. And at the same time, we hear a lot from providers, accountable care organizations, about more pay for performance and how they're getting evaluated by CMS and Medicare on, the types and the value of the services they provide. What types of communications in your marketing plans and your ongoing business are your companies doing to address this head on and to actually, how early in the marketing planning process do these types of communications actually take place?
Wow. I'm not sure we're doing a good enough job in that, but on some level, we need to sort of get folks out there who are advocates and evangelists that go on our behalf. I think, there's a lot of factors in rising costs. We all know it's not always just the pharmaceutical company. I think the pharmaceutical company, you mentioned, was a soft target. It's easy to say them without understanding what the whole supply chain is. So what we're trying to do is to get people to understand. And by the way, I should say I'm on the branded side, and people always pay more for branded products, right? They love the value that the brand brings. Say that. But can we in fact get people who believe in brand and believe in products and their arguments? Because we can say a lot of things and people just be like that, and I don't believe in it. So I think there's opportunities within social space, advocacy, and get people to understand some of the challenges that they're facing and have them represent us. People, listen to other people more than brands. They trust their friends more than they trust manufacturers. So I think there's an opportunity there to use our partnerships with advocacy groups and with consumers who believe in us, sort of fight our fight. Because we're not all, bad guys.
Well, it's first of all, I think you need to get pricing, market access, we call it very early on, really as early as we start talking about the development there, part of the discussion. One of the reasons why we sometimes, if we stop the program very early on, because we can't see the value, how we can create value, unless, and that is because it is serving such a real, I mean, if there is a valid and unmet medical need, you can always, there's always room, but at the end, that's what is important. I think we as an industry need to think a little bit about how we handle that. You always have a few really weirdos in this industry, it seems, that do funny stuff with pricing. At the end, of course, what is our handicap is that we have to explain sometimes to people that we have to ask a certain price just to be able to keep developing these products. But we also have to be realistic. And there are a few themes that we come originally from Europe and having been here for many years as well. It is difficult to explain to someone why a product in the US costs 4 times as much as the same product in Europe. And so we have to, as an industry, have to think about that, but also we need to do a better job in not expecting the US to pay the bill for the industry to do our research. That is something that we have to also be realistic there, and also sometimes we are running as a family-owned company. We know it's so we don't have this pressure from Wall Street, whatever, but so we do also think it's important that we really think fairly about pricing. I think it is important because it's, at the end, we need to look at the value you bring, and I don't think it's always, you have to say what is the maximum price you can get out of this value. We have to think of all aspects as well. We need to realize that sometimes we might be asking too much. But still, if there's a realistic price, and most of our products I think right now are pretty realistically priced, you have to be able to build a case to defend it, be open with it, be transparent enough to say, well, this is what the costs are actually, and this is what we need to ask for. Right? And then I think the transparency will help us there a little bit. And it also doesn't help if your gross price is 2 times or 3 times higher than your net price. Well, now it's happening more in the US. If we look at that, I think we have to ask ourselves, what is the role of this virtual or less official list price? If that doesn't make any sense anymore, then we need to start. That's also hurting us. And you have to understand, it says 10, but actually it only costs 3, then it's also difficult to explain. We need to think about it.
I think, you mentioned what accountable care organizations and providers are starting to look at, and I think one of the issues is that I don't think the model's sustainable, but to partner with these organizations to develop alternate pricing models has been highly unproductive because frankly they're not ready. Right? They're not ready to actually partner around the total cost of care-based model or an outcome-based model, and to some extent they're also not particularly motivated to do it because there's not a real benefit for them. It's much easier to just put pressure on our margin rather than have a reasonable discussion about what the total value is. And so our opportunity, I think, is to think about how do we work with folks who may have a vested interest in that to define the value parameters and then the systems that are going to capture that information and try to accelerate that so that we can have more productive discussions. But I'm sure, I've been trying to do innovative pricing models for 7 years and no one really can deal with it.
But it's also, like you said, if you go to an insurer or a payer and they say, okay, we can make it very complex, and you have to do a lot of work, and then you can prove maybe something, or you can just say, I want 20% discount. And as long as that is, and they get that, then there is no incentive for these organizations to take a little bit more of a harder route. And we make it also, and we also are our own worst enemy, I have to say. It's something that throw that into. I think what we you see that sometimes the pressure is too high, that you see one company just, okay, they give in because for whatever reason. And then we got the whole industry suffering, and I think that is sometimes very, very short-sighted, because at the end it's not good for the industry, but it's definitely also not good for, because we start to offer things for a certain value and offer, well, that's just to fix our quarter 6 month numbers. So we have to be a little bit realistic on all sides, that certain things have a certain cost. We have very real costs in developing wonderful products for patients, and we have to be very serious about that, but also be realistic at the same time. If you can get away with, we had discussions definitely in the specialty care area where some rare diseases, and you can, if some people say, well, we can get away with 90,000. Well, we can get away with it, but would you like to comment that live in front of a camera? Well, then you rather do it, yeah. That's a little bit the thing. We have to be, what we'll get away with, but what is really valuable. Because it's much easier to defend it. You say, well, this is a real value. You can defend it. So it's things you just cannot defend. But there's the other side as well. If you talk to countries, and I'm very global, so you talk to countries like South Korea. I mean, I had long discussions there. So I said, well, why would you pay half for the others? No, I don't pay half for your Samsung television or Hyundai or whatever, Kia car. You don't expect people to do that, but you expect to pay half of something that is true. If it has true value, then you shouldn't let them say, well, okay, you have it. So there's also, I think, that the role that we have to play. We have to say, well, things are just not right.
So building on that a little bit, a lot of the stuff, sometimes it feels a little bit of us versus them, like pharma versus the rest of the world. It takes a lot to create a product, bring it to market, get it approved, bring it to market, price it correctly, get it reimbursed, get it prescribed, get it into the patient's hands, etc. So there's a lot of effort and science behind that, and then we're spending time defending the price, defending a lot of theories through that process. And now with ACOs taking hold, and so in those challenges, my question is more about how are we helping the industry get better at this, especially now with the ACOs in play and the pay for performance that they're modeling. So it actually came up over lunch today. We're talking about, and we have our own struggles, and we're focusing on our struggles how relate to the industry and all the different channels and stakeholders that we have to deal with. But I certainly was about to like in recent months that in between those stakeholders, the information sharing or the tools that they have to be able to work reasonably together to get things done, they're not there. So the example that came up over lunch was that physicians are getting paid performance and getting scores based on some of the outcomes that they're driving. At the same time, get a number, and behind that, they don't have the data, the claims data behind it to really understand why is this happening, to help them better. And is there a role that the industry plays in helping them bridge that gap, especially if we products and stuff going forward? So is there a role that we play in helping them come together and get better information sharing and stuff?
Yeah, personally, I think that I don't think we're necessarily in the business of, I guess we could be helping folks manage their practice or per se. But I do think, coming back to how are those measures being defined, and how do we partner as an industry with organizations that are defining those metrics become really important. Make sure the right things to be measured, right? We have a lot of that experience, and we know how to measure outcomes, probably better than most. We know how to, we're trying to, certainly in oncology, you talk about CCN value blocks or ASCO cost guidelines. We're trying to sit down with those and partner with them and say, well, we understand your methodology. Here would be the points we want to do. Here would be the analysis you might want to think about, so that they have, we have a robust discussion around what are the dimensions by which they're evaluating performance or drugs or these kind of things. I think ultimately servicing accounts around understanding that then is a bit more tricky, not necessarily.
We've got a couple minutes left before we're going to take a coffee break and set up for the next panel, but is there a question or two from the audience that they'd like to pose to the panel?
So,
that whole area of digital we need to bring together various capabilities. On the one side, you've got the IT and technology coming in, you've got analytics, which traditionally has stood as a separate silo, just measuring sales force performance. You've got the brand marketing teams and their agencies developing content and strategy, and then you've got commercial operations as a whole. Some discussions we've had with companies such as yourselves, there have been people internally who have kind of mooted the need perhaps to create a digital multi-channel operations as a centralized group, which brings in, under which there is an IT group really that's responsible for enabling platforms as well as analytical platforms, not the IT infrastructure that you see outside your emails and all of that. It's really related to customer engagement, bringing in expertise, whether it's data science or whether it's multi-channel analytics and the whole content production and everything under one umbrella, so it becomes a single window for brand marketers to leverage this capability. Is there, do you think that's the direction in which pharma will move, or something like that? You may have taken some steps, but how difficult will it be to break down some of those silos and kind of take over the turf with some of the other people?
I think that model makes sense when you have a pure marketing operations groups doing a lot of business within the organization. I think what IT has done a very good job of is justifying capital expense and the return that it's going to get on much larger investments. The issue in going to that model is now we got to justify people to drive that technology. And I think there's been a lot of instances where people will buy these technologies without understanding those people processes they're going. And now you're left with these technologies trying to be managed by IT folks who may not understand business or overstretched business folks who really can't dive into the technology. So there needs to be an organization committee to say, yes, right, this technology makes sense for us because we can see the value in it. But we also see the value in creating an organization to run it and manage it. And that's not only, multi-channel, it could be analytics as well, it's certainly content management systems that feed all this stuff. I think there's an opportunity for farmers to really look at that and say, okay, we're going to use these core technologies, these core people to support our businesses. And I haven't really seen that sort of yes, we're going to do it. And it goes back to the buy versus build. We've had agency partners who raise their hands and say, hey, we can do this for you. We can do it more reasonably, cost effectively. You don't have to increase your staff. So in a lot of cases, they become that.
I think we changed quite a lot. We have a lot of people very broad with but again, a few years ago, you never saw the people in our industry. Combined with people who were in the industry but have the ability to think differently. And that is interesting because you create, by doing so, you create a lot of new things. But then platforms, etc., are not the issue, it's all the change management. So you have to deal with your own corporate marketing organization, your country marketing organization, you have, and I just brought in a new head of this digital group recently. He did all the interviews with all the marketing people, and he said, oh my God, we have a lot of education to do, and that's true. I mean, we have to learn a lot ourselves, and this is, and some will learn, some will not, and that is the role of marketing. Your strategic part of change is changing so much that you might sometimes need people to do that.
I think too, for the GSK anyway, it's really been about truly aligning around the shared vision. So it doesn't matter necessarily that, IT draws from IT, analytics draws from analytics. If we're deployed and working together around that aligned goal. I think where we've run into trouble previously is where everybody has a different agenda. Our agenda is to drive customer engagement, but the IT is focused on a big, SAP, who knows, something with the financial system. So I think that's been a big focus for us, because on my team I have people that are deployed into the brands, and there's always debate about, well, she should have a dotted line of me or a straight line, and I'm like, it could be a squiggly line. It really doesn't matter, right? I mean, we're here to drive the business and engage customers, and the more effectively we do that around sort of a shared vision and aligned goals, that's really where it happens. It's not about, to me, building large organizations. It's about having high-performing, healthy working teams.
So your point is a really important one, which is, and I think it stems from the fact that if you look at general managers who've been in the industry the last 15 years, largely they driven business on a traditional model and had a lot of sexy values and vision. Sexy values, I think, are really so it's kind of a little bit of fluff, and they haven't necessarily, the thing I see sometimes across my peer group is they haven't necessarily invested the time to really learn what would it take. And then it's really scary then to say, well, I'm going to guide this and make this change and try to guide that as not having the experience, not having any success in a meaningful way to build it on. And I think that's what you see a lot of organizations is the inability to make that leap is largely because people can't get over the fact that they don't know how to guide it. Right? I mean, if you ask almost any BU that you come across, what's your working definition of big data? They do have there's no answer. They're like, well, let's just analyze a bunch of stuff. There's no like, what does predictive analytics look like? What does prescriptive analytics look like? What does adaptive design look like? I mean, there's just so many. What does customer-centered design look like? User-centered design. There's just so many concepts that haven't been, indoctrinated into or GM that you end up with, a couple champions trying to push it through, but against a much larger background.
Good job. Just a real interesting reverse mentoring with very senior executives at GS Payments. It's been a lot of fun. Where all the digital experts have been paired up with the CEO, and it was extremely successful. Because, first I was a little skeptical. But it turned, it's amazing just how quickly sort of everyone's come up to speed. It's interesting, engaging. So that's kind of.
Hopefully you guys
Taking notes and timing.
I didn't. I think I got a success.
That's great. So, on behalf of Rob, myself, and all of Indegene, I'd like to thank each of our panelists, Robert, Dana, and Theo. And the good thing about this is we get a 10-minute break now, but these people are going to be available if you have any further questions or comments or whatever. That's what this forum is all about, sharing knowledge. So we're going to take a break now. If we can get back here by 5 we'll start the second panel. Okay. Thank you again.